everybody. Welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. If you are a new viewer, we're so glad that you're here. My name is Sam. I'm joined by my co-host, James Anir, and we'd love to welcome you to Ask the Unfaithful. James, how are you on this beautiful Friday?
I am absolutely fantastic. Sam, how are
Well,
you in Tejas?
well, we've got a balmy, probably 90-degree day, super humid, typical for Texas in May, but I'm not complaining. I'm happy to be in a great state, the Lone Star State, as we say. But in recovery work, sorry, the Lone Star approach doesn't work. So I'm happy to be with you. Today, we're going to tackle a pretty substantial question. Now, if you ask this question, I can hear betrayeds. They'll be like, oh, Sam, James, I'll tell you how this happens. But today, we're going to handle it very streamlined from a clinical and coaching perspective, but super practical. And today's question is going to be approached on both levels. So I'm super excited about it. Today's question is, how does the unfaithful continue to re-traumatize the betrayed partner? Do you think we're opening up a can of worms here today, James, or do you think we're going right to the heart of the matter?
I think we're going right to the heart of the matter and probably opening up a can of worms because, obviously we're limited on what we can cover. So we worked hard on trying to come up with sort of the biggest ones. I even had Sharon put in on it. So, however, many in the audience may be able to will be able to come up with other things that we don't talk about.
Absolutely. And we always would love for you to follow us on YouTube. You can hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have comments from you. You can always reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. So, James, as we launch out today, what are some initial ways that the unfaithful continue to re-traumatize the betrayed partner?
So I think I just want to preface before we do that, I want to preface it with so that the unfaithful understand what's going on in what we call trauma brain. Because trauma brain, which is how trauma affects the brain, it actually makes physical changes in the brain, but it really affects how a partner is going to be able to handle things, what triggers look like, how fast that spiral is, and so on. So when we do this, when we do any of these things that re-traumatize our betrayed, then the brain doesn't know between trauma from last month, 10 years ago, and now. Once these things happen, our partner's brain, our betrayed's brain, goes straight to the same depth as discovery, as trickle truth, as everything else. So it feels it in the same way or reacts in the same way as the original trauma. And so this is really keeping that in mind whenever we are doing things in our recovery, whenever we're talking with our partners, and how we act, so that we can keep in mind what our intent is versus how it impacts.
I think what you've said is really great because it can help the unfaithful understand we're 6 months down the road. Why are they having such a substantial reaction? It's been a year, Sam. Why is he or she having such a big reaction? Well, anything that strikes at that pain center can make them feel like they are back to day one. It's not necessarily a personal thing from the fact that what you did in this moment is re-traumatizing them to the extent of the initial D-Day, but anything that resembles that level of pain is going to strike at that same pain center and send them possibly over the edge for a little bit of time. Is that fair to say?
That is, and the more that it happens, the worse their trauma gets. The deeper it gets, the more entrenched it gets, and the harder it is, the longer it takes to process that trauma and be able to heal. So I'll just do this with my hand, but basically, is that looking right? Yeah. It's basically, this is behavioral or recovering from acting out behaviors, right? Very quick. Trauma in general. So if it's family of origin trauma, betrayal trauma is going to be that long, long time. So if you keep that in mind in unfaithfuls, keep this in mind that this takes a long time. It's not going to be as quick as your ability to change your behaviors or stop your behaviors. You know, if you think about when you go to the deep work, like family of origin work, where did this come from? Your curve is going to be very, very similar to betrayal trauma.
Makes great sense. I love it. So keep going before I interrupted you. What are some of the practical, maybe even high level ways we re-traumatize our partners?
Okay, so one of the ones that we see so commonly, and I did so many times until Sharon made this really strong boundary, which was really like, get out, was wanting a reward for good behavior, especially doing well in recovery. You know, look at what I'm doing. Look at how well I'm doing this. This is going so great. You know, and really what we're asking for is an attaboy or an
Mm,
girl, right? Gold star, platinum star. But everyone wants to be recognized, right? For the work they're doing. The problem is when you ask your betrayed to recognize it and cheer for you about your progress, your aha moments, your realizations, and so on, is kind of like asking for praise when you throwing away your Uzi after you've emptied the clip into him or her.
right.
So
It's
yeah, go ahead.
it's feeling like they have to cheer us on when this is what they should be doing in the first place.
Yeah,
And it makes the betrayed feel like, are you one of my kids or are you my partner? Are you acting like a child where I have to? And the number one thing that we love to say is, hey, can you just focus on the good things I'm doing? No, I'm not ready to focus on just the good things you're doing because the bad thing that you did or the multiple bad things that you did absolutely fed me to the wood chipper of life. So forgive me that I'm not ready to get my pom-poms and shout and cheer and do cartwheels for you because you did a therapy session or a coaching session or you read a chapter in a book. That could be strong language for you unfaithfuls, but today is a day where you need to hear some good, cold, hard truth because this information, wouldn't you agree, James, could change the entire fabric of their own recovery as an unfaithful.
yeah, it can because we've relied on our partners to cheer us on, to buoy us, to give us the gold stars, just like they do our kids, right? For so long that it continues a pattern of essentially, it is essentially a victim pattern. It's a nurture me pattern, like we talked about in the last podcast. Nurture me versus love me, right? And so, and that's one way. Nurturing is one way. So we can't continue to receive that and drain our partner's energy that way. So we have to learn a way to do it for ourselves because we do need to be validated, but we have to learn how to self-validate and um, have our support. Our supports can validate us. Our support should be both challenging and be willing to validate when we do something right because that reinforces it. So this is not about okay, going to stay in shame. You still have to get validation, but not from your partner.
Because putting it on our partner removes the burden or the responsibility for us to self-validate. And gee, guess what? If I had been self-validating, if I was healthy enough to self-validate 20 some odd years ago, maybe I wouldn't have made some of the choices that I made and had an affair in the first place, right?
Absolutely. If we knew how to do, because self-validating is part of self-loving acts, as part of shame resilience, right? But in the past, we've lived in shame, and that's one of the big reasons that we acted out to self-soothe in the first place. Here's the problem with asking. The other problem with asking our betrayed to validate us is that takes their focus off their own healing, which they deserve to be doing 100%.
I've already burdened my betrayed with pain that they didn't deserve. So now burdening them with the task of them cheering us on or babysitting us or soothing us just pours salt into the wound. And so I try and teach my clients a lot of the things I've learned from you and other individuals as well, and even my own journey is it's okay to validate yourself. It's okay to say, hey, Sam, you did pretty darn good right there. That's a good job. We did well. We're doing all right. Good work. We can be tough on ourselves, but we forget the fact that we can also encourage ourselves and validate ourselves, right?
Yeah. It's not the easiest thing to do because, if we're living in shame, self-validation is actually something we resist because it's so much more comfortable. Even though it sounds weird, it's so much more comfortable to stay in the shame. It's like this warm blanket. The problem, of course, is that it keeps us there. So we have to venture out of that and start the uncomfortable journey of self-validating. This is not the same thing as just ego inflation. So because that's
Yes.
the opposite, that we
All all the betrayeds, driving, listening, gardening, whatever they're doing, just said, thank you for saying that, James, because I needed that qualifier. That's great. Now, what about this? What about the fact that we unfaithful can constantly procrastinate? We can constantly push it away. Oh, I'm busy and work is busy and I've got kids stuff and there's so much going on. But isn't that more of a deflection because maybe they're afraid, maybe they're stubborn, maybe they're angry? Talk to that.
So we talked about procrastination when we did our perfectionism podcast, that perfectionism is part of the reason that we procrastinate, because we can't reach that. We're afraid that we won't be able to reach that perfect level. So that's one of the fears that we can feel. Another fear is what's going to be the result of this. It's brand new ground, right? It's not something that we know if the next step is going to be good solid ground or quicksand, even though
Right.
if you're following a program, you've got people who are helping you, they're going to tell you that is solid ground. And yet it's still fear inducing. The resistance can come out of fear, of course, but it can come out of anger. It can come out of sort of our teenager, our inner teenager activating and saying, oh, no, I'm not doing that. Get away from me. No, 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 no. Need that, right? The things that you can imagine typical teenagers can do, or stuffing it, just sort of bending over on themselves and not engaging in it. So those are what keep us from engaging. That's the procrastination or the delaying. And frankly, this is a great place for willpower to come in. Not, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but not taking your will back, but using a little bit of gumption or willpower to push yourself into being more proactive about our recovery, because this is what we're not doing when we're doing these things that we're talking about now. We're not being proactive, and we have to be, because nothing will
And
strike fear into the hearts of betrayed more than seeing us not work our recovery.
and I think so often we can also think, well, something's better than nothing. So we'll just go get a general help, or we'll do, no offense, but sometimes we'll just say, well, we've been seeing the same therapist for 5 years. We'll just go back to them. Well, I would think in 5 years you've been seeing the same person. Maybe there's a disconnect. Maybe they are not trained or experts in infidelity or addiction or problematic sexual behaviors. Maybe they haven't been through it. It's time for a change, because oftentimes we as unfaithful think, well, I read a book, I had a couple therapy sessions, I took a course. Doesn't that count for something? I'll let you speak to that.
I mean, yeah, those things count for something. You get something out of them, you bring that with you. The problem is if you go to a professional, and there are lots of really great therapists out there, there's lots of really great trauma therapists, but betrayal trauma is very, very specific, and it has to be worked in a different way than regular trauma. Um, so if people are not trained, preferably certified, And, by absats, for instance, and, if they don't have that, then they are not going to be able to treat in the way that that we as people who are trained in betrayal trauma know how to treat. And that can actually do far more damage. And we have seen it in our practice. I'm sure you have in yours. And then also the problematic sexual behavior. So sex addiction, sexual compulsion. I mean, I'm a CSAT. CSAT's it's certified sex addiction therapist, but we deal with compulsion, the whole range of it, all the time. And then the APSATS is CCPS or CPC. So that's the coach. But
Wouldn't you
yeah, go ahead.
wouldn't you agree that our work as unfaithful, I mean, look, we brought this into the relationship or the marriage.
Yeah.
Isn't it healthy for the betrayed to have an expectation that nothing is more important than our recovery work? Nothing is more important than us being safe. Because if our recovery work is in place and if we're safe, well, then we're going to be a better mom or dad. We're going to be a better partner. We're going to be a better husband. That is, I think, one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle for the unfaithful that doesn't really get is that this has to be at the top of your priority list because this affects everything in your life. This affects your marriage, your parenting if you have kids. It affects your workplace. It affects your performance at work. It is, in my opinion, the top of the funnel of which everything eventually flows out underneath. Would you support that?
Without a doubt. And this is one of the reasons why I continue to journal first thing in the morning. I set a relational goal. I set a recovery goal. So I put it in the forefront of my mind every morning. If you get up and everybody has to go to the bathroom in the morning, you're a captive audience. Okay, that's great. Do it there. Do it when you have your cup of coffee. Instead of reading the newspaper, and it doesn't have to be some long journal. Just make those goals. How am I feeling today? What is my relational goal? What's my recovery goal? Boom, puts it right into the forefront of your brain, and then everything during the day, whatever it is that needs your concentration and focus, it's still forefront of your mind, so that it's always there, and you're far less likely to do the wrong thing at that point.
Let me ask you this. I have a number of people on my caseload who are working through the why of their choices because the betrayed wants to know why so that they can support the unfaithful to never have it happen again. They want to know why because them knowing why helps them feel safe about the future. They want to know why to say, hey, where was the problem here? What was I doing? Not that it's ever the betrayed's fault that the unfaithful cheat, but they still might go, well, what happened? Why did this happen? But we as unfaithful, we kind of think, oh, I wasn't healthy, or oh, I was stressed, or oh, we were just disconnected. And we want to throw out these little kind of maybe excuses or little justifications without doing any work to find out why. Why is that so re-traumatizing to the betrayed?
Because if it's that shallow, it's going to sound like an excuse. And it is just excusing. Oh, well, I was stressed, or my job did this, and I was stressed, and things just happened. Like, if we are people of integrity, those things don't just happen. There are always deeper reasons. And here's the thing, we've talked about it a lot. There's childhood trauma, there's unmet childhood needs, there's neural pathways that get established. So we have to if we know what those are, then we can make choices that are sort of in that same track that help us change things. The problem also, though, is once we find those out, and if those are shared with the partner can still see that as excuse making. So at the same time that we might share that, not early on, please, because you have to go through a process, disclosure, impact letter, emotional restitution work, and then the reasons why come in at the emotional restitution level. So those reasons why, though, if they're not accompanied with work, with, hey, I know why this happened, this, and I'm working on it this way to
Right.
prevent that from driving these behaviors because they aren't an excuse. I have to work on these things. That's, you know, that is vital and it's honest. Um, it's an honest because we come by it honestly, but it isn't an excuse then. And so the timing of sharing that is really important. For a partner, though, knowing why like that doesn't, unfortunately, doesn't seem to assuage the trauma very much. It's helpful to have the knowledge. Why did this happen? Where did it come from? Um, but honestly, it doesn't. I mean, it explains why the actions took place, but it doesn't take away the pain that it.
No, not at all. You're exactly right. But I think that our why changes. I've said this in videos. A month in, my why was pretty primitive and not very deep. A
Has.
year in, my why was much more substantial. But 5 years in, oh my gosh, it was like the lights came on. I had done more work. I had more time to process it and think it through. But I'll tell you, in almost 20 years out, my why is totally different. I could write you a dissertation on my why because of the work, because of the insight, because of the revelation, because of being so far out and being able to get phenomenal help from people of your caliber and others. Our why should change over time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Not change, it should evolve. I should
It's
say it's better
evolved.
to.
Absolutely. I think evolved is a great word for it because it, you know, our understanding takes our understanding of it takes much longer, right? So it is an evolution of that. Um, it's also why emotional restitution should not take place until there's significant empathy developed and a greater understanding of why this happened and what it did and really being able to be in that so that we can truly show some compassion. Um, the there is a part of this that is really important that you brought up earlier, and that is there is no reason that there's nothing that the partner did to deserve this for this to happen. It really, if that's what you're still hearing, those are excuses. You know,
Right.
you're to this, you're to that, you're not enough this, you're not enough that. That's absolutely no. Just no.
Hmm. That's
Nobody.
not a why. That's not a why.
Nope, not at all. So that means that the understanding of the whys are very, very shallow still. And Sam, another thing is this the minimize, the ising, the minimize, rationalize, intellectualize. We do it internally until we know better, and we do it to our partner. And it's absolutely devastating when we do it to our partner because it says quite literally, I'm not serious about this, I'm not going to work on it. And then the betrayed's trauma brain tells them he or she's going to do it again.
That is so, you're so right. Say that again. You said the ising, the rationalizing. What else?
Minimizing, intellectualizing, I would say reductionizing, but there's no such word. Reductive is taking 5 things that your partner says, these are things that are really important to me, and reducing that down to 2. So that's reductionism.
So well said. I love that. I think so many betrayeds would be like, oh, yes. And I think as unfaithfuls, we can go, yep, did that. Here's something that a lot of us do that it's probably an obvious point. We won't spend too much time on it because it is so obvious, but talk about the trickle truthing or drip feeding or new information being dropped on them over a short season or even a long season of time. I mean, that's probably one of the most talked about re-traumatizing things that we do,
It,
right?
it is because it's so damaging. This is why formal disclosure is so important because it's the goal is one and done, right? So that
Yeah.
everything comes out in that one place. It's with people who keep you safe during it. And the trickle truth just is those drips and drabs of oh yeah, I remembered this, and oh, I did this too, or we're too afraid to say something initially and then it comes later. Every single time, that's like having the initial discovery. Every time it affects the betrayed's brain so badly. It drives that trauma deeper. It literally changes the shape of the hippocampus and the amygdala, making them work less efficiently,
Mm.
and thus making our partners or the betrayed more reactive. And there's no need for that.
I I I couldn't have said that better because doesn't it undermine the feeling of safety? And not just the feeling of safety about their partner, but the feeling of safety in life, because betrayal trauma leaks into feeling that they are not safe in life because they're waiting for the next shoe to drop of a traumatic experience and being wounded all over again. Is that fair to say?
It is very fair to say we're going to do a podcast on what happens to a betrayed sense of internal safety when
Yes.
betrayal is discovered. But I can make that a little quite brief in that it affects their belief of safety in themselves, in their own intuition, in their spiritual life. Everything becomes suspect because everything that they thought was true now is questionable because the very thing, the person they loved the most has just betrayed them, and they didn't see it coming. And that means everything is suspect. It is absolutely devastating, not just from that one place of their primary relationship, but throughout life. And so everything that we unfaithful do needs to be aimed at being a safe person, right? Which means not doing unsafe actions.
I love the intensity. I've known you for a long time. I love how intense you got there because it speaks to the care and the concern of the betrayed. We're doing this for both the unfaithful and the betrayed, but it is so harmful to the betrayed because when you understand the way betrayal trauma strikes at them, it doesn't just affect the relationship with their partner, it affects their relationship with life, with experiences, with events, with their overall general safety. And then we, unfortunately, and unfaithfuls, you have to hear us today because I am one of you, as is James. This is not hammering you, but I think for those of you that are a little bit further out, you might even say, you know, Sam, I kind of need to be hammered. I'm listening because I want the truth. I want the cold, hard truth. I need the truth. I want to save my family. I want to save my marriage. What I'm doing isn't working. And so there's a point where we have to understand the depth of how deeply we have wounded our partners, and it changes their outlook, not just about marriage, but life. It doesn't mean it can't be healed. It doesn't mean that it can't be restored and that there can't be healing, but it'll never be as though it never happened, but it can still be beautiful. But I love the intensity because it speaks to your concern as a clinician for both the unfaithful and the betrayed. And when you guys do intensives, I know that you and Sharon are able to help both the unfaithful and the betrayed see things from each other's perspective, right?
Yes, yes, we can. I can tell you, it absolutely breaks my heart to know what betrayeds go through. And I cannot relate to it on a heart to heart level because I've not experienced it.
Right.
In minor ways, but not in this way. And,
No.
and so, this is this is what unfaithfuls need to get. It's not the easiest thing to get, but this level of destruction is so complete that that it is just absolutely heartbreaking. Um,
Because if you don't have someone advising you who has been through it before, you experience something we call therapist induced trauma or authoritarian person induced trauma because they approach it from an approach that's just, I gotta say, ludicrous. When people start throwing out things, well, you're going to have to just deal with it and move on. Or, you have a part to play in this too. Or, well, have you considered what you were doing to cause the affair? It's ludicrous statements like that that wound people. And it's unfortunately, it fuels the engine of our unfaithful stupidity where we kind of think, I know what my partner needs. Here's what we're going to do. I know what we need to do. We're going to do these things. And as you said earlier, we take our will back.
Yep.
Or what I say is, anytime the unfaithful is in charge of what recovery looks like early on, it's a red flag. Because the unfaithful oftentimes is managing their own shame, trying to manage their own consequences, and that's not who needs to be in charge of recovery. Would you agree?
Precisely. We don't have any clue how we got there here, right? And so what that means is that everything gets driven by that shame, by the need for validation, the need for nurture, the need for empowerment, which comes out actually as external power and control. There are several needs in there that we're driven to meet those needs until we know better, and we can't know that uh, and until we get help, and we cannot believe everything we think, right? Not anymore, because it
No, I think
just got
you
us.
said that beautifully. We can't believe everything that we think is unfaithful because it's this thinking that got us in the situation that we are in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. At the beginning of my recovery, and yes, I went into 12 step. First step is you really have to realize how unmanageable your life's become, how you can't manage this particular thing, right? And part of that is we have to surrender our will about this to whatever higher power you pick, whether that's what, if you're a person of faith, that's your God. If it's simply the other people in that room who have been through this, we have to give up our will. That's surrendering our will. When we start thinking that we know what is best for us, we've taken our will back and we're heading down the wrong road again.
Yeah, a great friend of mine, I worked for him for several years, and he's still a great friend. Rick Reynolds said to me in one of the earlier meetings when I first found him, he said, you know, Sam, your best efforts have brought you to this place. And this place is a pretty effed up place, don't you think? And I said, you know, I never really thought of it that way, Rick. Maybe it's time that I trust your wisdom and stop thinking that I know what we need. And it was a real game changer for me. He did it, he used a scalpel like you, was just so strategic to not come at me with this arrogant, confrontative, approach, but he did it to basically say, bruh, your best efforts have brought you here. Maybe it's time to trust somebody else. Don't you think that one of our biggest struggles as unfaithful is to trust somebody else that they might know what's best for us?
Oh yeah, we lived by the rules, the ACA rules of don't trust, don't feel, don't talk, right?
Mm,
So trusting other people, especially for men, because I can speak to that, trusting other men is really, really hard. And if you don't have somebody who has been through this advising you, layperson, professional, at least one of each, you are using the same brain beliefs and misunderstanding to try to live differently. And that is that definition of insanity, right? You don't
right.
know what you don't know. And so taking your will back really literally means unsurrendering, right? No, I'm gonna
Yes.
take that back. I'm gonna control this, which is ego. Ego. It's inflated ego. For those of faith, ego stands for easing God out.
Which is probably in many ways what those of us that come from faith, that's what brought us to this point. If you don't come from faith, man, when we think we know what our betrayed needs, we make ourselves look like such, quite honestly, an idiot, because if we really knew what our betrayed needed, we wouldn't have had the affair or the sexual behavior or the multiple affairs. Today is a good lesson on humility for us unfaithful. And these are all things that people have said to me or I've said to myself that I had to learn. And I come from a baseball background. I needed a coach to take me in the dugout and say, son, listen to me real good. You're on this team, and I love you enough to tell you the truth. I'm not going to just sit here and just blow smoke up you to make you feel good about yourself. I'm going to tell you the cold, hard truth because you need this, because you haven't had a lot of truth in your life. You've had some circumstantial pain, but you haven't had some truth. And so if you're an unfaithful, it's if you don't have someone having these conversations with you regularly, fueled by love, fueled by compassion, fueled by an attempt to reach you and have influence with you to save you and to save your family, I would invite you, James and I would invite you to consider the possibility that maybe you are not seeing the best fit for your situation. Because we love to be arrogant and say, I got this, right? We love to say that. I got this. I know what I need to do. If I had $1 for every time I had an unfaithful say to me, I know what I need to do, I would buy you a brand new Ford Raptor. I would buy me a Lamborghini, and when we would go race each other down the streets of Florida, James. But why do we say that? Why do we have this arrogance that says, I know what I need to do, I just need to do it?
Because it's far more comfortable to go back to our ego, right down that path. Remember, the path of acting out, the path of ego, is every step we already know it. Unlike the path of recovery, where we're not sure if the next step is going to sink us up to our foreheads, right? And down the path of ego, we don't need people surrounding us except the ones who tell us, yeah, you're right, which are not the people we need to be surrounded by. Every one of my supports will challenge me, whether they think I'm right or wrong. And so I got this. I always used to say, and still say, I got this is the death knell for it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If you're an unfaithful today, say this to yourself. I don't got this. I don't got this. I need someone who has this. I need someone that knows what they're doing. And on behalf of James and I, you're never going to hear that we are the only supports out there. We call it like we see them. We're not even the best. All we are is one brilliant guy that's doing his best to help those. And I'm the eye candy that just is trying to do his best to tee up the brilliant genius. We're trying to do the best we have with what we have to give. Because I'll tell you what, at the core of why we do this is if you had this 14, 17, whatever years ago, if I had this 18, 19, 20 years ago, it would have been a lifesaver. And our hope is that this is a lifesaver to you unfaithful and to you betrayed, because we are very pro marriage and we are very personal restoration and family restoration. That's why we love to tell you about our own mistakes, because man, if you just didn't make our mistakes, your recovery will get so much better. So before we say goodbye, James, what are some final thoughts that you would just shout from the rooftop to the unfaithful or the betrayed or both?
I think it's really important to understand that where you are right now is not where you're going to be in a month, in 6 months, in a year, if you're doing your recovery work. And that's for betrayed too, giving yourself that gift of having somebody help you heal is really, really vital. And you know, for the unfaithful, do your work. Uh, because it is so rewarding. I always say, well, you may think that Sam and I are wise, right? And I always say that I'm only wise where I've been a fool.
Mm.
And so what we're trying to do is to save you some of the steps along this journey that or mistakes and pain that we have made, and to be able to accelerate that healing for both betrayed and unfaithful.
And if we can help on that note, I hope that you've heard our heart today. If you're a betrayed or if you're an unfaithful, I hope that you have heard a dugout talk from our heart today on, man, we care so much, because I wish we had people like this early on that cared this much that we could have gone to. If we can help, you can reach us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. Please understand we do not do counseling or therapy or coaching over email. We are just not able to do that. But if you have a topic you'd like to have us address, if you are interested in coaching or seeing James and Sharon or their intensives, you can reach out to us via email. You can also like this post. You can follow us on YouTube. You can leave a comment as well. Don't try and do this alone. Don't wing it. Get rid of your ego. Understand that your ego brought you to this point and it'll keep bringing you to more destruction. So get some healing, get some clarity, get the best help you can. We'll see you next time.